the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so as you can see from the title page, it's a new batch of releases from North Star, Series 8 to be precise, and this is the 8th time I've done an episode of the show on them, and yeah, I don't think there's too many independents where I do pretty much every new release that they do. Admittedly, some independents obviously release a damn sight more. So, Ian, lucky man, sure. Well, not as the case may be, you don't know what I'm going to say yet, do you? Anyway, before we get on to that, a big thank you as usual to everyone that commented on last week's episode of the show. Always appreciate your comments, and it might take me a few days to get around to replying to them, but I'll try and reply to all of them. And before, again, a bit of news in actual fact, very interesting news in actual fact. For the past few months I've actually been working on doing my own bottling, not for me personally but obviously for the shop, and it's obviously something I've wanted to do for a long time and did indeed look into it some time ago, but for one reason or another it just didn't work out. This time however it has worked out, or well, yeah, it has worked out. The juice has been bottled. So I got the samples, selected what I wanted, it's been bottled, the label has been made, I've designed it, it's off at the printers. I'm just waiting now for a sample of the substrate so I can sign that one off, get it printed, get the labels on the bottles and get them in the shop and do an episode of the show. I'm not going to tell you what it is until I actually unveil it, but I'm hoping it's not going to be too long in actual fact. And yeah, I'm happy with it. I'm certainly happy enough to put my name to it, and indeed my name is on the label. Oh yes, yeah, I am. I'm really quite stoked about this in actual fact. I mean, it's about bloody time, I can say. You know, I review all these whiskies and go, good God, why did they bottle that? You know, it's about time I had my name on a label because it's something that I thought was really good. And I will let you into a little secret. It is not going to cost you an arm and a leg. But anyway, I'm not going to reveal any more until I physically have a bottle here that I can taste amongst its peers and see how it stacks up. So anyway, that's that. So yeah, anyway, North Star. So next, this batch of releases, unfortunately no Spica and no Vega, so you lot are not going to go nuts over it, but no, I think there's some interesting stuff, and they're pretty well, I don't know, I think they're interesting, and I think again Ian has selected some good stuff, and well, there's not really a great deal else to say apart from let's have a look at today's lineup. Right, okay, so first bottling we'll be looking at is an Inchgower. This is a 11-year-old Inchgower from a single bourbon hoggy. Well, I'm assuming they're all single cask bottlings. Never actually said, but I'm assuming that they are, because he doesn't have a sort of a cask reference or anything like that on the labels. At least I don't think he does. I'm pretty certain he doesn't. Anyway, so this is an 11-year-old Inchgower distilled in July of 2007 and bottled in June of this year, and bottled at 52.6%. Now, Inchgower don't really see an awful lot of these days. Mind you, never really saw an awful lot of it anyway. I've always liked Inchgower, you know, classic sort of grassy citric spey, you know. Often disappointing, so it'll be interesting to see what this one is like. Second bottle I'm looking at is a 13-year-old Auchroisk. This was distilled in February of 2006, bottled again in June of this year at 51.2% from an Oloroso hoggy. Now, judging by the colour, refilled Oloroso I would imagine, so we're not expecting it to be a sherry monster, which is good because again, Auchroisk, nice, crisp, slightly minerally, fresh, citric, and you know, hoggies, Oloroso hoggies, you know, can just stamp all over that and it all becomes rather pointless. But anyway, we shall see. Next bottling we were looking at is jumping up quite a bit in terms of age. This is a 26-year-old Girvan, distilled in September of 1992, bottled in March of this year at 53.5% and from a bourbon barrel. Next bottling we're looking at is quite an interesting bottling. This is a blended grain. Now, you don't see that very often, it has to be said. Now, I can't imagine that Ian's blended this together, because I remember him telling me in the past that blending was not quite his forte. So I'm imagining this is probably a cask he's picked up of blended grain. It's 36 years old. It was distilled in July of 82, bottled in March of this year at 52.5%, and again from a bourbon barrel. Now, the interesting thing is that he's used the Red Highland label for this, which obviously all of those grains come from Highland distilleries rather than the odd lowland one. But he hasn't. But what I would have thought, he would have used the yellow grain label that he normally does. So. Interesting. Don't know why he's chosen to do that. Must admit, I've not really asked the question. So if you're watching, Ian, maybe you can let me know why you bottled it under the Highland red rather than the grain yellow. But anyway, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So just an interesting aside. The penultimate bottling we'll be looking at is this one. This is a 37-year-old Cameronbridge, distilled in February of 82, bottled March of this year, from a bourbon barrel, bottled at 51%. And finally, we have a Glenturret Ruadh. This is 8 years old, distilled in December of 2010, bottled in March of this year, 58.5% from a bourbon hoggy. Now, it was a bit young. The last time I think Ian did a bottling of Ruadh, it was a sherry cask, I believe, and I remember it being sort of, smoky, treacly, barbecuey, and all rather pleasant. So it'd be interesting to see what that comes out at, because I believe that the Ruadh is bottled. It's quite got a high peating level. I think it's somewhere in the region of about 80, and well, to be honest with you, if I was owning Glenturret, I personally wouldn't bother with it. I would just, considering how god-awful their distillery range is at the moment, no age statement, god-awful stuff, I would just basically go, let's forget doing all the peated stuff, let's forget about, being part of Famous Grouse, let's just concentrate on producing quality unpeated spirit like we used to. But sadly no longer do. Anyway, that's just a little aside and a bit of digging there at the owner's Edrington. So anyway, we're not here to criticise. We're here to have a good tasting session. So let's kick off with the Inchgower. Right, okay, so let's see what the Inchgower gives us then. Fresh, grassy, slightly citric, nice weight of honey beneath that. It's got a nice density, a nice grounding. Some sweet barley, a little bit of maybe almost kind of olive oil I just got then. Touch of oak, but not too much oak. I think that's actually really quite a pleasant nose. It has that fresh, grassy, citric character, but underneath there's a balance and a weight of barley and honey and a little bit of oak. I have incidentally bought this. It is on the shelf and available at the moment. It's about 50 odd quid. Can't remember if I actually got around to sticking everything on the website, because it's only just arrived. But if I haven't, it will be up soon, shall we say. So from that nose, there's a bit of an alcohol prickle, but it is, it's 52.6, so it's a bit surprising to get such a noticeable amount of alcohol, but it kind of adds to the sort of like the freshness, the crispness. So let's see what the pass on. quite weighty, quite alcoholic in actual fact, and really the alcohol is masking that finish, and it's quite surprising considering, like I said, it's only 52%, only, he says. So it's got some fleshy fruits, it's got some barley, it's got a little bit more oak, a little bit more sort of sweet vanilla character. The alcohol has actually sort of emphasised the sort of like the citric, slightly mineral, grassy kind of character. And again, I think it's got a lovely balance to it. It's got a lovely mouthfeel, a lovely weight to it, and some nice complexity. So we will put, as I've got just a smidge left, I didn't know whether I'd be able to keep enough just to put a little drop of water with it, but I will do, just to see what that does to it. It's kind of made it a little bit more waxier, sort of beeswax, a bit more barley, touch of white fruit now as well. It's a bit richer, a bit more denser, not quite as grassy and high toned, and possibly the honey notes has probably have come out a little bit more as well. But you know, I still like that. I think that's a lovely nose. That's what the palate's like now. Actually, the palate is the other way around. It feels fresher now. It's a little bit more of the grassiness and a little bit more of the citrus that has come out. Again, still plenty of barley, still some honey and a little bit of oak underneath. Yeah, I think that works really well with water in actual fact. It certainly just takes the edge off the alcohol, but it doesn't seem to sort of change the balance of the whiskey. I mean, apart from obviously the palate being a little bit fresher. So all told, yeah, I think that's rather good. Okay, so let's move on to the Auchroisk. I think it's Auchroisk or something like that, isn't it? I believe the pronunciation is, but I always call it Auchroisk. Anyway, let's see what those are like. Well, as I expected, the sherry character is really quite subtle. There's some dried citrus rind, apricot, barley, vanilla. It's got quite a lovely roundness, and there's almost a sort of a winey kind of Chardonnay, apple-y kind of character happening. Again, there's a little bit of dried fruit in the background from the sherry, but you know, this is just how I like my sherry cask whiskies in actual fact, subtle. And I think that's the thing with sherry. I mean, you know, I don't bang on about the sherry monsters being all pretty much one-dimensional, and they are, but you know, refill sherry casks or vattings with just a bit of sherry, you know, can just add that little bit of an extra dimension, and this is perfect proof of that. Almost a bit of melon now. That is a lovely nose. Really, very, very good. Let's see what that's like. It really has that oak Chardonnay character on the finish. I mean, herbal, intense. It's a bit more sherry on the palate. There's a little bit more tannin up front, a little bit more dried fruit, raisins, sultanas, but it still has a lovely freshness. There's a crispness. There's an almost sort of citric acidity. It's almost like a wine. I mean, like I said, I'm getting that very winey Chardonnay kind of character on the finish, and it just almost has got that buttery Chardonnay oak kind of character. You know, the way, I mean, I don't know whether you're well versed with oak Chardonnay or not, but it just tastes like an oak Chardonnay on the finish, but not a big blousy oak Chardonnay. It's got that, like I said, it's got that spice, citrus and minerality, a bit of dried fruit. You know what? I really like that. That is quite unusual, and considering it's an Oloroso hoggy, you know, obviously a refilled one, it's just quite a surprise, and you know, not what you would expect. And I always like the unexpected. Right, okay, so on to the Girvan now. 26 years old. Let's see what the nose gives us. That's a nice intensity. I mean, I often tend to find Girvan to be towards the lighter end of the sort of grain spectrum, but this has got some nice weight to it. It's got grainy dried fruit, apricot, coconut, apple, nice amount of almost dark honey in the middle. Vanilla toffee, touch of milk chocolate. I mean, that's a lovely grain. It's got a lovely mellowness to it. You know, 26 is a good age for a grain. It's, you know, as with most grains, it does pick up an awful lot of oat character. So you know, you're getting the sort of the toffee, the milk chocolate, the coconut, the vanilla. But the spirit itself has got a slight, you know, it's got plenty of dried fruit character. Slight cigar smoke. See what the power's like. Fuller than the nose lets on, fuller really for a Girvan. Real juicy, fruity, dried fruit, mouth-watering fruit. Again, touch of coconut, a little bit of tannin, a little bit of chocolate, some spice, a little bit of alcohol as well, just giving it that slight mouth-watering note on the finish. A little bit of wood smoke. That's lovely. That really is a lovely grain, and you know, I did think about buying it. The problem is that I've got, I mean, although old grain whiskies, and this is well, this is relatively young in grain whisky terms, isn't it? At the end of the day, they're still not cheap. I mean, if you compare it obviously to a sort of like a malt of a similar age, then the value for money is remarkably better. But they're still relatively expensive, and I've got a few on the shelf of various grains. And you know, I love grains, as you well know. But you know, trying to get people to buy them, sometimes people do, but. The only reason that's basically the only reason I didn't buy any of the grains that Ian's bottled this time is purely down to sort of shelf space at the end of the day, and certainly nothing to do with the quality, because that is a fabulous Girvan, really good. Right, okay, so on to the blended grain. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Oh, that's a big chunky grain. That is quite rum-like, sort of almost molassy, dark fruit, dark nuts, coconut, hazelnut, macerated dark fruits. I mean, oak is actually pretty subtle. I mean, obviously, you know, you're getting the coconut and the sort of slight spice, bit of tobacco leaf, touch of earth. I mean, these are all going to be sort of wood-derived characteristics. But again, the balance is really very, very good. You know, it's 36 years old. It's showing that little bit of, like I said, rum-like maturity, and I often find that old grains do tend to move in a sort of a rum-like manner. Obviously, the sort of, you know, length of time in the cask, the oxidation, that kind of thing. That's really damn good. See what it passes like. Really chewy, sort of tannic finish. but again it's got that lovely sort of dark honey which balances up that tannic kind of character. A little bit of spice on the finish, a bittering oak. Overall it's a little bit lighter than the nose would suggest. There's a little bit, again it's got that sort of lovely rummy kind of dried fruit character, but we're more in the sort of lighter sultanery sort of end of the spectrum, as a sort of the darker raisinated fruit end of the spectrum. Yeah, again I like it. It's got verve, it's got intensity, but not sort of overly alcoholic. But it's got, you know, a lovely balance again of sweetness and alcohol on the finish, and, you know, intensity. Yeah, again I think that's a really impressive bottling, and I think sort of, you know, goes to show that Ian is, well, certainly got a nose for a good cask, shall we say, and you know, I like to see these kind of interesting things, and you know, you just wouldn't, I mean, how often do you see a blended grain? Well, that's good. On to the 37-year-old Cameronbridge. See what nose gives on this. Quite subtle, quite peppery, dried fruit, tobacco leaf, green pepper, vanilla, coffee. I don't think it's quite as complex as the other two. I mean, it is a lovely nose. It's balanced. It, like I said, I don't think it has quite the complexity. But you know, it's not bad. See what that's like. Quite balanced again, quite peppery. The pepper kind of builds quite nicely into the mid palate. It gets a little bit bitter towards the end, and a little bit of dark chocolate possibly, but there's definitely quite a lot of bitterness at the finish. And although there's a bit of coconut, a bit of vanilla, there's not quite. I mean, I'm not saying for a second that it is unbalanced. I'm just saying that the finish is more skewed towards the bitter oak end of the spectrum, and maybe it could have done with a little bit more sweetness. Again, I don't think it's as hugely complex. Like I said, it builds quite nicely. The intensity builds. The pepper notes kind of build quite nicely. But I think sort of on the balance of those three grains, I think it is the least interesting, although the quality is still very, very good. But you know, that's just my opinion. Right, okay, so let's finish with a bit of peat. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Oh dear God. Yep, it's rough old Glenturret. God, I never thought I'd say that about Glenturret, which is a real shame. But it's vinegary, it's fainty. Yes, there's some peat, but it's young. There's Mhor notes. There's, God almighty, it's just really industrial. And you know, if this was me, I would have lumped this into a sherry cask. I would have gone, right, yeah, smother it with sherry, do something, or just leave it for another few years, because it's just, the oak hasn't removed enough of the faintiness. It's not quite cardboardy. It's acetic. It's vinegary, and it does kind of settle down a little bit with a bit of aeration, but no, it's just far too young. And actually, yes, there's a reasonable amount of peat, but for 80 parts per million, it really doesn't kind of come across that way. Anyway, let's see what the palate's like. Biscuity, fainty, cardboardy, bit of peat, astringent pulp tequila white fruit on the middle, drying alcohol, bit of peat on the finish. Hurrah! Peat's almost quite chocolatey in actual fact. I mean, that's a slight redeeming character to it, it has to be said, but it's kind of, oh no, it's rough. And again, you know, if that was me, I'd have shoved that into a bloody PX cask, is what I would have done with that. I'd have gone, yeah, let's give that as much sherry character as I possibly can to mask all those faints and yeah. The aftertaste is pleasant, shall we say. Once you've kind of endured drinking it, the aftertaste is actually quite enjoyable. Yeah, maybe I'm a bit of a masochist, I suppose. I don't know. Anyway, let's put a little drop of water with that and see what that does to it. Okay, it's a little bit more sweeter barley now. It's a bit cleaner, but it's still got that hardness to it. You can really smell it. Peat's pretty much gone, and all you're kind of really left with is that sort of slight industrial barley character, and again a little bit of faintiness. Although, like I said, it is a little bit cleaner now, putting a little drop of water with it. See what the palate's like now. It's kind of broken apart a little bit. It's a bit kind of sugar water and a bit of earth and a bit of faints and a bit of pepper. It really isn't pleasant in my personal opinion. I'm sorry, Ian, but mate, this is not a good cask. Well, no, all right, no, that's wrong. The cask is probably okay. It's just bottled far too young. It really needed more time. Or if you were going to bottle it, like I said, you should have sherry finished this. In my personal opinion. Oh, it's just hard work. It is not enjoyable, you know, and it's sort of something that, how could I possibly sell that to somebody? You know, it's like funky, weird. Yeah, I can do that. I've got no problem with that, and I have a couple of them, you know, on the shelf, you know, but they're not weird and funky in a slightly unpleasant manner. You know, they are still pleasant if you kind of like that, and that just no, but which is a shame, you know. But you know, independent bottlers, you know, you're never going to get it right all of the time. You're never going to please everybody all of the time, and I'm sure there's going to be a load of people that go, oh my god, I love that, and you kind of obviously have to sort of take the balanced view at the end of the day, I suppose. So, but anyway. Best sum it up, I think. Right, okay, so the Inchgower. Yeah, I liked the Inchgower. It had exactly what I wanted from an Inchgower. Grassy, citrus, that kind of character, but a weight to it as well, you know, sort of a lovely kind of barley, sort of apricot-y kind of weight, a bit of oak, balanced, really very, very nice. Exactly the same with the Auchroisk, and like I said, you know, for an Oloroso sherry hoggy, it threw you a curveball, it has to be said. And this is what I love about independent bottlings, is they do this to you, you know. Just because it says a distillery name on the label and you know the style of the distillery, single casks, you know, can be a bit different, which to me can be good or bad. But in this instance, I really like that. I thought that was really impressive. The Girvan, yep, again, really lovely sort of, you know, mature-ish kind of grain, a little bit heavier than I would expected for a Girvan, certainly on the palate, but again, lots of character, lots of complexity, really very, very good. And the same for the blended grain, again, really quite impressive. And you know, I imagine a lot of people will probably go, blended grain, oh bloody hell, you know, really worth giving a shot to if you like grain whiskies, because that was really very, very good. The Cameronbridge, again, nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I just think it didn't quite have the complexity of the two other grains, and it again, it's 37 years old, so not cheap. Cheaper than the 37-year-old malt, I hasten to add, but just I don't think quite had the complexity to warrant the price tag, which I think is 100 and something, I think, from memory. And the Glenturret Ruadh, well, I won't kind of kick that any more than I have done already. Like I said, I don't think there was anything wrong with spirit per se. I just think it was just bottled far too soon. Like I said, Ian, you may well disagree with me, and a number of other people, you may well disagree with me as well, but God almighty, that was such hard work. And at the end of the day, whiskey is supposed to be enjoyable. You're not supposed to kind of like have to go put up with it just to get to the finish and go, oh, actually that aftertaste is quite pleasant. I'm glad I kind of suffered through that, you know. And like I said, if that had been me, I would have done something else with it, either a PX cask, a wine cask, anything other than just bottling it as it was. But yeah, that's me at the end of the day. And I'm sure that when I finally get my bottling out, I'm sure there'll be probably somebody that's going to go, God, you bottled that, you put your name to that. But you know, I'm, like I said right at the beginning of the show, quite happy with putting my name to what I chose. So anyway, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I hope you've enjoyed it. So until next time, good dramming and good afternoon.